Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of SuperCoach, mates. Well, unfortunately for both Thomas and I, our sides choked it in the last 30 seconds of the game. So I was very disappointed about yesterday. Obviously, we're recording this on the Tuesday. And as I turn to Thomas now, I'm sure Thomas is very disappointed about gifting up the lead to Sydney in the last 15 seconds of the game. How have you recovered from your devastating loss, Thomas?
Could be worse. I mean, to be honest, I ended up missing the last quarter because I was driving to a dinner. So it was chat on the radio, which is probably better for my sake, to be honest. Not actually watching it in person because I don't think it hit as hard as it would have if I was watching it in person. But yeah, definitely disappointing that probably a game we should have definitely won, and that was probably a game to kind of rubber stamp our credentials as a side that can compete against quality opposition. But unfortunately, similar to, I guess, the Adelaide game early in the season, it's one that got away. So, yeah, definitely frustrating. But I guess for the next fortnight against the Giants and the Dogs coming up, it's a pretty important fortnight to make sure if we win those games, our season's back on track.
Yeah, so as per normal, what we're going to do is Thomas is going to have the his side and the community side on the screen. And then over on my other screen, I will go through my own team. And yeah, we're just going to provide some commentary around, players who you can potentially bring in. So obviously, as we spoke about last week, sort of the idea around the buy period is you want to get players who are just coming off the buy and trade out players who are on the buy, especially with your rookie premium upgrades. So yeah, other than that, I am going to leave it to Thomas for a sec while he goes through his side and the community side.
Yeah, definitely not a frustrating week, I'd say. I was probably surprised of how I went. To be honest, in my side, looked a bit dicey there at times. Finished up with an 1837, and the SCMates community side, 1935. I guess the community side's been stronger by a fair margin this season, just because I probably avoided the injuries in that community side compared to my side. I had a few decent injuries come by and a few necessary trades I have to kind of pull. But hopefully next round is a strong one for myself. Yeah, I guess the captaincy as well. I mean, I think both ended up being on max score, and so that probably negated out each other. But I guess the frustrating part for my side is I'm still carrying probably one or two premiums that I'll talk about as the episode flows along that have been really, really struggling in my own side. Whereas in the community side, I think overall, bar the underwhelming premiums here and there, I don't think I'm carrying anyone that wouldn't be considered a premium at this point in time. So that's been a really positive for the community side, and hopefully we can continue that moving forward. But yeah, as Nathan said, we'll go through each of the lines as per usual. So yeah, in the defense line, it's been pretty good, I think, overall. There's probably one glaringly obvious problem in my own side, and that's unfortunately Dan Houston. I did end up playing him. I've just swapped it around for this week with Whitfield coming back on. So I guess trading in Holmes the week before allowed me to basically get rid of Houston eventually, and that was going to be at the bye. I think at least I got a good score out of him last week, and this week I probably dropped out of my best 18 anyway. But I guess I'll let Nathan talk about the Dacos and the Houstons and of the world when it comes to it. But yeah, from what I saw, I was at the game as well as Nathan yesterday, and really frustrating from what I saw anyway, because it seemed like Houston for a lot of it was stuck on the other side of the play majority of the time, and unlike Port Adelaide, we've spoken in previous episodes, they don't really pass the ball through him as much as Craig McRae claimed to make that promise earlier in the season. So yeah, it's definitely frustrating, I think, for Houston owners. Look, I think if you're limited on trades, he's not the absolute worst option in the world, but he's probably dropping more of these 50s and 60s, which is the biggest issue. And if you can get rid of him to anyone, I think we've spoken about a few players coming off the bye particularly Ash and Whitfield, I think are really good trading options this week in the defence if you don't have them playing St Kilda this weekend. So, yeah, definitely one that you can trade into. But other than that, Archie Roberts in my own side, on both sides actually, in the community side as well. He's one that we'll talk about a little bit as well, because it seems like obviously the reason why everyone brought him in was he's playing off half back and getting an absolute shit ton of the ball, and that basically made an automatic 120, 130 every single week. But that's dried up a little bit, and this is his first ton in a while. I think ever since the second of Brad Scott and how Dean Solomon wants to run things as the interim so far, it seems like, they've swapped a little bit around positions. They've got Merritt down back now. They've got Langford down there. They've got who else down there? I forgot the halfback's name, but the other one down there that takes a fair bit of the ball. Unfortunately, that doesn't leave much for Roberts, and he's playing basically, from what I heard on the Sunday night, was Merritt was playing off one halfback, taking all the kickouts, and Roberts was on the other halfback. And I don't think that 110 reflected exactly what he got. Like, he got about 72 in AFL fantasy, and I think the issue is that a lot of his great scores have accumulated in fantasy as well because of the possessions he's getting and so frequent possessions. So he's one to watch. He's definitely one that I wouldn't bring in or trade out. If you have him, obviously keep him until he starts putting in some stinkers. But you also want to be careful if you see another poor score from him. Maybe he's one that if you have the trades, offload whilst he's got money, because if he does play that role where he's limited in his scoring, he can really drop quite quickly and kind of I guess he's not a bad D6 if it comes down all the way to that, but I guess it's a bit frustrating to own. And the other player I just wanted to touch on as well is Cal Wilkie. Obviously Naz came back against the Swans. I watched that game obviously for the majority of it. Yeah, look, I think Wilkie, it wasn't the best score, 84 for him. He's going to probably tether around there a little bit. Naz, it seems to me like at least this game anyway, when he wasn't playing on ball, he was playing down back. So it's the opposite of what he was doing early in the season, where he was playing all over the joint and predominantly playing. If he wasn't playing midfield, he was resting up forward. And I think now he's flipped a lot of it in the back line and taking kickouts as well. That's going to impact Wilkie a little bit. I don't know how much that's going to impact him longer term, but I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing, especially against those sides that have multiple key forwards. So Sydney had 4 playing on the weekend: Marty, McLean, Kerno, and Logan McDonald. I can only assume a lot of bit of that poor scoring came from Wilkie having to play one-on-one on one of those four key forwards, which obviously impacts his ability to intercept the ball and take those cheap marks and kickouts. But I think moving forward, he should be okay. Like the Giants, he shouldn't have a problem, especially if Dougal Howard's back from injury. So, look, I don't know. I think there's one to watch that Naz coming back's impacted him slightly, just because it's not really a mid-forward split for Naz. It's more of a mid-half-back split now. So there's one to watch for him, that's for sure. But how did you go, Nathan? And I guess you can shed a bit more light in how these Collingwood players are going, particularly off the back line in Dacos and Houston.
Yeah, well, I'll start off with my own team, and then I'll come back to that. So I've got Sinclair and Holmes as well, so I don't need to go over them again. Tom McCarthy. So I started with Tom McCarthy. He has come really good over the past few weeks. Another 132 on the weekend. He went up $38,000. So this now means that since round 6, he's only had 2 scores under 100. His break even now is 54. So if you've got $90,000, just over $90,000, I don't think that's a bad idea moving Houston on for McCarthy. I think McCarthy really looks at home now. Luke Parker. So even though North Melbourne got smacked by 20 goals, he's still got 106. So I think he's solidified his spot. I also have Cal Wilkie. So I'm a little bit intrigued by what Thomas said about the Sire coming back. Obviously, it is helpful having a St Kilda supporter among us. So I think that's really good intel. I still got Farrow. So Jacob Farrow, I still have him. I think I'm just going to keep him now till Essendon's bye and move him on. I was glad to see that Bodie Ryan got another game at Hawthorn, and Dara Joyce, who came in, was on the bubble for Brisbane. I'm not expecting him to play, but he got a nice little cash boost there. Look, I was at the game, at the King's birthday game as well. Houston had some absolute howlers, especially in the back half. I think there was one ball where he kicked a cross goal and it basically got intercepted and it turned into a goal. So look, I think you just have to move him on. I think based on the evidence now, I moved him on last week for Carl Wilkie, or 2 weeks ago now for Carl Wilkie. So I think unfortunately he's one you just have to cut your losses on and just accept that this is him now. Although in saying that, not having Darcy Moore and potentially Billy Frampton and Maynard as well might help his case, but I don't think you can be relying on that. So yeah, I think unfortunately it's now just time to cut your losses on Houston. If you have the 200 odd, the 160 odd K to go from Houston straight to Nasiah, I don't mind that move. Otherwise, I think there's probably some good defensive options there. So I think Nick Blakey's sort of around that sort of 520 mark. Cal Wilkie, so he's still a top 6 scorer across the season, although he is starting to sort of get some challenge there. Luke Parker is 473. I think the ideal one this week is Lockie Ash, though. So I think out of all of them, I think I would be moving Houston on for Lockie Ash. He's 509,000. He's definitely in GWS's best 2 defenders. So there's no way he's getting dropped. So I just think that, if you've got the, what's that? About the 115 odd K to go from Ash to Houston, I think just do that. Set yourself up and just ride the Lockie Ash train home. Because I think that's going to be much better in the long term. Josh Dacos is an interesting one. So I think I think Josh can go in the midfield, which I think does help him out a bit. So if you've got Josh Dacos, I think you're just going to have to accept that if he plays more that defensive role, it is going to be a bit of a lower score. But if he can push up into the midfield, I think he's capable of these 100 plus scores. So yeah, I think it's a sort of a watch and act with him. I wouldn't be surprised if, given our injuries, that he does have to spend more time in that back half, just without Maynard and those guys down there. So look, he's not the worst pick, but I don't think I'd be rushing to bring him in anytime soon. Josh Dacos, just purely for that reason.
Yeah, that's understandable. From what I saw anyway from that game yesterday, it seemed like when Maynard went down, Houston became like that second quarter, he kind of bursted up a little bit, scored about 20, 30 points, and then completely died off again. It seemed like he was playing third tall on, I forgot who the Melbourne forward was, but he was Petty maybe. He was playing a third tall anyway. Yes, they were decimated a little bit by injury in the back line, but that's one to watch on Houston if he does become, rather than roaming halfback, which they seem to like the use of Howe and Dacos pushing forward. Houston doesn't really have that aggressive halfback role at the moment, which we all loved at Port Adelaide. But yeah, one to watch, but I think it's time to move on. Dacos, from what I saw anyway, he's pushing way high up the ground and being aggressive around the transition area, playing a bit of midfield as well. So he's one, if you do have him, it's probably not your worst priority at the moment. And he's, as yesterday showed, he's capable of still scoring some decent hundreds. But moving on to the midfield. Midfield is definitely a tale of two halves a little bit, because some of those players that didn't score so well last week scored better this week. Lachie Neale starred in that Suns game. seems like the Suns is quite an easy matchup for opposition midfielders, particularly those accumulators do quite well. Neil dominated, which was really nice to see after a tag game last week. But I think the main complaint I had, unfortunately, was that LDU and Matt Rao, who's but in my flex position, I think flex position in that you'll see in the SCMates side and in my midfield at the moment in my own side, both absolutely shut their bed a little bit for different reasons. I guess LDU got absolutely torched against a Freo side. I think every North player scored poorly, and then Rao got tagged out of that contest, which was to be expected a little bit because Dunkley has done previous roles on him quite effectively. Not a hard tag, but a hard tag around the contest, which is where Rao has been most dominant. Looked pretty dicey there at times, potentially getting a sub 60. So a 74, I guess, can't complain. Probably the downside to him is he hasn't really strung a few good games together. He's had these spurts where he scored well in the 90 there or whatever, and I guess that's the frustrating part for Rao. And I guess a big bonus of why people wanted to bring him in last week was his potential to score quite large off the home run. But he had a really good back end of the season last year. But I think I'd keep fat with him because he does score pretty well regardless. Sammy Walsh is a big problem. I think he's going to be coming out of the side this week with the bye. I thought he turned a little bit of a corner with Josh Frazier coming into the helm and potentially things might change. But I guess I don't know what it is at the moment. It seems like his shoulder's giving him a bit of grief, but just doesn't look quite the same as what we're used to seeing from Walsh. And those 120s and 30s are really far and few beyond. And I think if you can get someone like a Dawson this week, that could be a really positive trade with Dawson not having that bye. You got, Tuke Miller and Jason Horn-Francis around that price as well in the forward line. We'll talk a bit later on. But other than that, you got Heaney, who scored very well. Looked at a pretty average score, I believe, until he decided to get that goal assist, which was that match-winning goal in the St Kilda game, which would have bumped his points up a fair bit. But yeah, Heaney's done pretty well. Baz had a really tough night at the office against the Crows in that high-pressure contest. That kind of impacted his score a little bit, but he's been churning out tons significantly quite well, and I guess Dacos as well, and Bont just keep out churning out decent scores. I guess the question for you here, Nathan, is, you're looking at a bye this week, which obviously only two teams had it in Richmond and the Giants. What are you looking at as options to bring in? Because, yes, everyone's, wanting to bring in Heaney and Smith and whatnot, but you've also got to be very aware of what you're paying for as well with the buys coming up. You got, I believe, Sydney have their bye next week, and then Baz has the week after. The problem with that Geelong bye is that he shares it with a lot of other teams that players have. So St Kilda's got one bye as well. If I just bring this up quickly just to double check who else has got it. That round 16 bye, I know, has been pretty dicey for a lot of teams from what I've heard. If I just bring this up. Yeah, so 16, you've got St Kilda, Geelong, Dogs and Melbourne. You've got Max Gawn, Bontempelli, Baz Smith, Max Holmes, Jack Sinclair, Cal Wilkie. There's a lot of players on that bye. And then if you look at round 15, that's Sydney bye. You've also got Eston, Lions and the Eagles. So one to keep an eye on. Would you be an advocate of trading Baz or say Heaney now is probably M1, M2 for the rest of the season? Or would you be looking elsewhere for now with the intention of bringing them later on? Because you've got some decent options as well. If you didn't jump on LDU, Rowell or Anderson, you've got those guys to potentially pick. But having seen their scoring, obviously last week, but in the prior, they're not quite the same as Heaney or Smith.
Well, I said last week that you have to just find a way to get Heaney and Smith in. And I think I was probably vindicated by that. So, I think Bailey Smith now with that sort of 106, which, if you can believe it, is actually a low score for him. He's been on fire most of the season. So I'm hoping now that, he doesn't go out and get 150 against the Suns, which is probably the worst possible matchup, given what happened earlier in the year. So I think there is a bit of thing there for them to sort of bounce back a bit. And Heaney, as I said, I think you've just got to find a way to get him in. So I think I've got probably 2 spots left in my midfield. Definitely would like to have those 2 in there as the last 2 plays if I can work out trades and whatnot. I think Bailey Smith as I said, I'm hoping that he will keep coming down. And I could pick him up. So yeah, I'll go through my own side. So I had Butters, I had Bond, so I wasn't too bothered by them. Zach Merritt was a bit of an interesting one. So obviously, I didn't watch that game on Sunday night, but hearing him play off halfback is, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I actually had Jai Sarong, who was the match winner. So, for those of you who've got Heaney, I did one better because I had the match winner. And then I had Murdoch, who had a low score. I think he's just about ready to move on. And then Nick Dacos, just flying at the minute. We said a couple of weeks ago to jump on him. He obviously doesn't play this week, but his break even is, if I can just get it up, his break even's 100 for Nick Dacos. So you'd think he'd probably be getting that. And then, unfortunately for Jack Eisen, break even of 42. He just has not been a good rookie for us. So, I think there's some really good options there. So, I think Finn Colourhand's about sort of $500,000. I think his break even, I think we were looking off camera, was sort of around that sort of 50 or so mark, 51. So, if you're strapped for cash, and, you need to sideways a Sam Walsh or someone like that, I don't think he's the worst option in the world to do, just given the price. But yeah, I think, if you don't have a Heaney and Smith, especially, I think you're going to get burnt in the back half of the year. So, I think I've probably got 2, maybe 3 spots left. So, 2 of them are definitely going to be Heaney and Bailey Smith. It's just, I don't know what to do with Sarong. He's still on my bench, just sitting there. He's got the bye. I'm hoping he'll be back after Fremantle's bye, and then he'll be just right to go for the rest of the season. So yeah, that's sort of a bit where I am at the minute with my midfield.
Yeah, I think Nathan's probably right there with regards to bringing in Smith and Heaney. I guess Heaney, I wouldn't bother bringing in this week. Just got the bye next week. Smith, you can probably hold off. I guess he's not going to get any more pricey if he pumps out one or two of these low hundreds, if anything. So I guess you can probably hold off a little bit if you're desperate for a midfielder and you're really struggling in that category with no backup. I think that's one to look at, Smith in particular, if you can afford him. At least you get 2 weeks out of him. But yeah, I'd say you want both by the end of the season, that's for sure. I wouldn't just stack your side with these underperforming premiums and just say you complete. I think there has to be room for bringing those 2 players in. Like, I understand it's been a tough season and I guess you're looking for value, but I think there's enough value elsewhere that you could potentially just get those players in, or at least one of the 2, and I'd probably lean towards Smith as a priority, if anything. But moving on to the rucks now. Look, we're not going to talk much about the rucks at the moment just because of how consistent they've been. Grundy's a watch a little bit with just how he's going. Look, he probably got fatigued a little bit against the double up, like St Kilda was working him around the clock to try and negate him and tire him out as well to help their own side. And Gawn, I guess, just hasn't really been hitting the straps as what we've hoped as a sole ruck as well. Jackson's been the star of the crop, I think, with how he's going. Sherry looks diabolical last week. I think there's serious issues with Sherry and his ability to compete against those jumping ruckmen. So he's one I would be hesitant. He's got a really good run coming up, but I'd be just wary of how he goes against those more athletic style ruckman. But I guess there is a potential option of trading Grundy whilst he's got so much cash. He's one of the most expensive players in the game at the moment, and you could probably divvy up that cash elsewhere. But I'd say at least wait to the buy as a bare minimum and just see how he goes, because he's one that can, take a 150 out of his ass very quickly. But I think we'll stop there with the rucks and move on to the forwards. And this is where it gets quite juicy because there's fair few forwards that you're able to bring in this week to either complete your forward line quite convincingly because, the forwards have been all over the place. You just have to look at Sheasel and Petrarca, who have been, uber premiums, I guess, for the forward line, and they stunk it up with 86 and 72. So it is going to happen more often than not with the forwards. Cozzy Pickett was probably lucky to get that 100. He got the match-winning goal or the sealer for the Ds. Got 100 there. He's slowly starting to find his way back to the 500k mark. It seems like he really does struggle with the tag at times, and I think teams are going to start really putting some attention to it because he's pretty much their most important player and provides so much of that run and carry through the midfield that you'll be crazy not to put some attention on it. Look, Milan Murdoch dropped to 54. You could probably hold him until his buy. I think with his DPP and his price, he's not too bad, and you can cash him out at any time. And he's going to play most likely more often than not. Philippou is a definite trade this week. I would not hold him any longer. He's starting to lose cash. He's got a high break-even, plays the Giants, and looked pretty disappointing against the Swans, as brutal as that sounds for someone as young as Philippou, who's had an injury-interrupted career so far. I think there's going to be times where he just absolutely disappears out of games, and that's an issue that he's got to address on the footy field. But 9-10 is simply not good enough for someone of his caliber, unfortunately. We'd be expecting a bit more than that. So he's definitely on the chopping block this week. And Rochelle for me as well has been a really frustrating pick. I think even there was hopes that potentially with Rankin going down, Rochelle could spend a bit more time in the midfield, but that wasn't really the case on Thursday night. And he's one that I guess I'm just going to hold a little bit longer. And I might trade him this week, I'll see, but potentially who I can get out of him. But he's one that I think has to go as well with just how volatile his scoring actually is. And when he isn't playing midfield, he just doesn't seem to get the ball as near as much as what he used to. But Nath, I guess the big talking point before we speak about some of the other options is Sam Durham at 365k at the moment. I believe as a mid-forward eligibility, you can basically side swap him from Philippou. Scored 127 on the weekend against the Blues, playing a pretty much full-time mid-role because Merritt went back in the back line. Yes, he did score 16 the week before, but I think he was injured in that game, I believe. What are your thoughts on Durham as an option, as a quick kind of cash grab / cheap F6 because of that role now? Playing midfield, and unlike some other players, he's probably solidified his spot a little bit in that midfield, has done it before as well.
Yeah, look, I don't like it, but I think if you absolutely strap for cash, I don't think he's the worst option. I think I would, much prefer going up to one of those, one of the higher caliber forwards, if you will. So I actually completed my forward line last week. So I actually now have, what I would say are 6 finishing forwards. So obviously, I think, let's see, 1, 2, 3 of them got hundreds, and the other ones were in the 70s, and then obviously Sheasel with 86. So, I'm not too bothered by Sheasel, especially, they got, as I said earlier about LDU, they got pumped by 20 goals. So I'm not really too concerned about that score. I think he's only gone under 100, I think maybe twice or 3 times for the year. So, I'm not, so it's 5 times he's gone under 100. So, I'm not really too bothered by it. Petrarca, I don't know what's going on at the Suns. I think they're a really good, they've got a group of really good players at the minute that aren't necessarily playing well as a team. So I think that's a problem that they have to address. Jason Horne-Francis, so obviously he came in, Port Adelaide had a good win, so I was very happy I picked him up. Cozzy was a late in for me. I think there was someone last week who I had to move on, that I think might have been injured or something. Flanders. So I put Flanders down to Pickett, which obviously worked out well for SuperCoach, obviously not for myself personally, being a Collingwood supporter. And then Shea Bolton. So on the flip side to the Sheasel discussion, obviously a lot of Fremantle players ran rampant, including Shea Bolton. I can see here Murphy Reid got 120 on the community side. So, I wouldn't be expecting that every week that Fremantle win by 20 goals, obviously. And then Jordan De Goey. So, um, you, I'm not too bothered by his. He did start off really well, and then he sort of went missing in the in the middle 2 quarters, and then I think he had quite a good last quarter. But it's since round 7, so since Anzac Day, he's only gone under 100 3 times. So I think he's someone who I will definitely be holding. I know he sort of went missing, but let's not forget he did have the opportunity to win that game off his own boot. Essentially, he would have put Collingwood. I think, 2 goals up with about 3 or 4 minutes left. So, if he kicks that goal, we might be having a different discussion here about him. But yeah, it was a bit frustrating. And then my flex players, so I've still got Leo Lombard. He's still just chugging along nicely, despite Gold Coast struggles. So, as I said, obviously I'm very happy as well about Brodie Grundy. Break even being over 200 this week, so I actually kept McAndrew. So that trade in a couple of weeks is just going to be a lay down misère for me, I think. Just McAndrew straight to Grundy, no matter how much he is. If McAndrew keeps going up, great, but I think in a couple of weeks' time, I think that will be the trade that will unlock the flex position for me, and really sort of start setting up the run home.
Yeah, that's not too bad. But I guess the other options that you can consider for this week with the forwards is particularly 2 that are coming off or came off their bye last week, and that's Tuke Miller and Jason Horne-Francis. Horne-Francis, yes, he looked a little bit touchy with a few cramp concerns or whatever. It looked a little bit dicey in patches against the Eagles, but finished off with the high score of 119. He's one that I think he is capable of. He does put out the 70s and 60s sometimes, but that's, you look at Petrarca, he's done exactly the same thing. Sheasel didn't set the house on fire this week, but you're looking at players who can potentially have a big ceiling, and Horne-Francis is exactly one of them, particularly with if the tag goes to Butters, then Horne-Francis seems to run around a little bit by himself. And Miller's probably gone under the radar as a super, super consistent pick just because his price hasn't really deviated after his initial drop. He's only gone under 80 once, which was in round 5 with the 72, and even that wasn't too bad. So other than that, he's had 4 scores under 90, which was 86, 84, 80, and 88, and the rest have been over 100. So, yeah, super consistent. Probably doesn't have the ceiling as the other midfielders do in that Suns team, but he's a forward option and he's a really consistent option if you would like to go that way. But before we wrap it up, what are your, first of all, trade thoughts this week, and who are you looking at as your VC and C option?
Well, I haven't actually sort of sat down yet this week and actually had a look at trades, given the round only finished yesterday, which is obviously a bit strange. So yeah, as I said, I think I'm a bit sort of undecided on what to do. I think this is a sort of a bad week. I kind of wish Essendon had the bye this week, because I think that Farrow to Lockie Ash trade would be the one I would do. But given the fact that Farrow's playing again this week, and his break even is 72. So yeah, I think if I do a trade, I think it will probably be Farrow up to Lockie Ash, which would then finish my back line. However, there is the conversation about Nasiah. Do you need Nasiah? Does he come into consideration as a bit of a thing here? He scored 101 in his first game back. So yeah, I think there's a couple of things there. The midfield. So for me, as I said, I've got I basically got Smith and Heaney left to get in my midfield, and then perhaps Darcy Parish as well. I don't know what to do with him. I think if he doesn't get named this week, I think I will sideways to Callaghan, which I'm not too bothered about because I had Parish from the start, so I haven't wasted a trade on him. And then as I said, I've still got McAndrew, so I'm sort of more keeping him there just for that Grundy, price in a couple of weeks. But as I said, I don't know this week particularly if I'm going to be trading. I think I probably will, but it's just a bit up in the air which path I go down. Captain and vice captain options. Again, I haven't really given this. Much thought. I think Harry Sheasel is a good shout against West Coast. I know that game is in Perth. But I think they are a good shout. North Melbourne. Melbourne, it depends on what happens with Pickett and Gawn. I can see Gawn, dominating that Essendon ruck line. So I think I would probably be safer putting the vice captaincy on Max Gawn. Captaincy, so I don't have a Brisbane player, but I would probably put one on the Brisbane player if I did. Otherwise, I haven't really, as I said, I haven't really given this much thought about the vice captain and captain options either. So I think having a look at the fixture here, I think if I had my way, I think I would do Bont as the vice captain. Just given they play on the Thursday night, and then I think I would probably do Max Gawn on the Saturday.
Yeah.
How about you? What are you sort of tossing up this week?
Trade options. I'm looking to shore up my forward line, I guess, a little bit, and get rid of some dead wood. And I've got the option of securing my midfield without having to, break the bank at the moment with waiting. I'll probably wait on Smith and Heaney in my own side at the moment and bring in one of the two at this time in play, just with the prices. Dawson probably comes in this week. Look, I had a chat with another mate off air, as in a couple of days ago, about Dawson, and one thing he mentioned was that when he watched the game against the Cats, that he absolutely dominated and only scored about 113 or 115 anyway. So it doesn't seem like he definitely translates in AFL fantasy a lot better. Whether that comes down to disposal efficiency or not, so probably another question. But probably looking at Dawson as a good option, as a good run home. Look, I won't be expecting super, 130s, 140s every single week, but he seems to be really consistent this year as well, which is what you want to see, even as work through tags by going up forward, going down back as well. The other probably option I'm looking at this point in time is whether I go and bring in a combination of Tuke Miller and Horn Francis, or take a risk on Durham as well, and then get Horn Francis and Durham and potentially get Tuke Miller the week after. So yet to be seen exactly how I roll the dice on things, because that means I'll keep ranking for another week. And look, I've just saw on Twitter as well, Rochelle. Rankin isn't playing against the Dogs, which might mean they might play Rochelle through the mids more often. Look, they said they would play him for a half last week. And look, I think without him, they do look a one-sided midfield. And yes, against the Cats, they did really, really well to push him all the way. But I think he does look better when he's in the midfield, and has shown to score very well. He just hasn't had the opportunity. But VC and C options at this point in time, look, that Crows game, Bontempelli, you could go early on him. Look, there might be a James Peatling tag waiting for him, so I probably would look towards a vice captaincy on Max Gawn, or even a Baz or Max Holmes, considering if you just look at how Lachie Neale went, he scored about 130 odd against them in the Q Clash, and they don't seem to tag. So Baz or Holmes arguably maybe would be a good option, because I think Max Gawn as well, yes, it looks good on paper at the moment, because you look at him and he goes solo ruck and against Essendon, who don't really have anyone good. But history shows this year, if you play Essendon, you just don't seem to score well as a ruck. And Gawn hasn't really lit the house on fire, regardless of how many taps he's got. He just seems to be, not as good as last year with regards to his scoring potential. or at least the last month of footy. Yeah, that North game, look, LDU and Sheasler, I probably wouldn't put the straight captaincy on both, but could be an option for a VC. Port, I'd avoid altogether against Sydney. Lockie Neal against Richmond could go bananas as well. I'd say that's another option. And if you're really desperate on the Sunday Arvo, I'd say Lockie Ash or Lockie Whitfield could get a lot of free ball down back, regardless of how they go, because I don't think the Saints are going to bother tagging either of them. But that's all we have time for today's episode. Hopefully you made it through so far so good in the first 2 weeks of the buys, and hopefully you've set yourself up for success in the last 3 weeks of buys. I know this is probably an elongated period of time compared to previous seasons, but yeah, sooner or later we'll get over them. We hopefully without any big injury worries to worry about. But other than that, we'll catch you for the end of next round.